Hello and welcome to Camp Xbox. The original Xbox is chock full of exclusives hidden away over time. It's not just hidden gems like Phantom Dust that have gotten reappraisals, but games that only exist on Xbox that hardly anyone brings up. Chase Hollywood Stunt Driver feels like one of those games. It's a stunt racing game that came out of South Africa and was picked up by Microsoft to be released only on Xbox. Today I want to dig into its history and lasting impact, and tell you how I felt about my experience. All footage was captured using original Xbox hardware, and I want to thank my campers and camp counselors for their support, and let's go ahead and take a look at the history of this game.
Looking good, keep going. Excellent.
Despite not being on the tip of many tongues nowadays, Chase Hollywood Stunt Driver has an interesting history. It all goes back to a single person, Dan Wagner, who is from South Africa and had been interested in video games since childhood. He moved abroad to North America to go to school and work in the gaming industry. After graduating in 1998, he spent some time in North America, but moved back to South Africa to start a game studio in his home country. Here they began I Imagine in 1999. Wagner claimed, to our knowledge, I Imagine is the only game developer in South Africa. We are certainly the only company in South Africa to hold licenses with Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony for development on their consoles. Stunt Driver was originally being developed for PC, but while showing the game at an expo, Xbox came in and picked up the game for the Xbox Incubator program. At the time, Xbox was up and coming, and with the Incubator program, they would help fund certain games from independent developers so the Xbox could have a good catalog. Microsoft backed them and sent people in to help the team work on the new Xbox console. When speaking to Eurogamer, Wagner said he loved working with the console. It allowed for easy implementation of real-time reflection mapping and self-shadowing. With this incubator program, they were quickly picked up for publishing by BAM Interactive. The project had a planned 2002 release for a while, and during its development, another Stuntman-based video game was released titled Stuntman. This game was developed by Reflections Interactive, the same team that made the Driver games. Chase was announced first, but Stuntman came out first in June 2002. In many interviews at the time, the question was asked what would make the game different from Stuntman, and it felt like a battle between the two. Stuntman seems like the more challenging game, with stunt objectives that needed to be cleared in one run, versus Chase's ability to break it down, making Chase seem more player-friendly, which Wagner hyped up about Chase. Stuntman would only appear on the PS2 and Game Boy Advance, so if you only had an Xbox and needed a stunt game, Chase would come out a few months later on September 20th, 2002 in PAL regions, and just 4 days later in North America. I recently learned of this game and had never played it before, but still I'm always interested in an Xbox exclusive, especially one that I see not getting any attention. So I played through it recently, and let me tell you about my experience.
Looking good, keep going.
As far as the plot goes in Chase Hollywood Stunt Driver, it's pretty light. This game does not focus on the story, but instead it's arcade action. And that's not a negative. It allows you to get straight into the gameplay. Yet there are lines of dialogue from the game's antagonist, Rick Bain, and the director, Mr. Chin, that hint at more under the surface. The story can be found through character descriptions in the main menu instead of cutscenes. In this game, you play as Chase, who has always wanted to be a stunt driver, just like her father. Unfortunately, her father had an accident when the reckless but great Rick Bain took a stunt too far. Once Chase rises through the stunt world, she will face off against Rick for stunt driver supremacy. It's a straightforward text story, and it's okay for what it is. The developers messed up Mr. Chin's text crawl though, because the text and background bleed together, and I have not attempted to finish reading his bio because it gave me a headache. I do think the game could have focused on taking a deeper look into the movies in which you do stunts. There are 4 movies with 4 missions each, and each mission is a scene from the movie, and you only get a basic explanation of its objectives and what you're doing, like doing barrel rolls or hitting tables. It doesn't do a good job of feeling like it's fitting into a cohesive movie. There's no explanation as to why a scene is happening. It's cool to run around different sets and see stuff explode, but it would have made it more fun to feel like you are actually taking part in the movie's plot. It doesn't have to be long, but just something to make it feel more like a movie than hearing action and seeing a few camera guys. I don't think any of this is a massive detriment though, because it's an arcade game and it wants to throw you right into the game, and I think that's admirable. I just found that it lacked a cohesive theme between missions. Sure, the movies have scenes similar to each other, from the Bond-inspired final levels to the 1920s themed first levels. I would have liked to have seen how it all connects together in a flashier fashion. With a few connector pieces or seeing the film being constructed, it could have kept it more energizing to get to the next scene. Chase's gameplay is easy to understand. Each mission presents you with a new scene from a movie, and you have specific objectives to follow. Doing each objective earns you points, and you rack those up to unlock new missions and cars. Unlike the Stuntman games though, these objectives do not have to be done at the end of each run. You can retry over and over and go for objectives separately. Most of the time they couldn't be done in one run if you wanted to try, since you might have the director ask you to flip on a jump and get a far distance on a jump, 2 objectives that work better on separate runs. It's an attempt to make the game more replayable, but it makes things easier than it needs to be. The most efficient way to beat a level is to break it down into its parts and complete it multiple times for specific objectives. The objectives have no real challenge though, except for a few times, and that is mainly due to issues with the physics engine, which we will get into later. For the most part, you are going at a high top speed, crashing in the cars, and performing stunts in the air. All of the levels set you up quickly to do these in the missions, and I hardly ever found the actual objectives difficult. If any difficulty arose, it was due to poor design choices, which means when you play these, it feels more frustrating than challenging and far too easy to get anywhere. I would have loved to have seen a single take mode that asks you to do everything in one go for more points or unlockables, but we get nothing like that here, and as far as the story mode goes, this is mainly what you get. I won't say it's not fun though. As someone who likes a good car game, I think this game starts off very promisingly. The early levels are set in an old school gangster movie, and they have excellent kinetic levels, with you racing against trains and hopping over rising bridges. Moving these cars and trying to hit objectives was fun, and the level design helped support that. These cars are slower, so I had a good grasp of how the cars are handled. Hitting B for handbrake turns felt good, and A for nitrous boosts felt right. The biggest issue that arose was the car's 2-wheel function, where you hit X to balance on 2 wheels. This hardly ever works and throws your car off more than it balances it. Other than that though, it's fun, but after these first levels, the game's missions and objectives repeat. And without a nice cohesion to the movie scenes, I think repetition starts to take its toll on the game. On top of that, once the cars get faster, the lousy car physics start to show up. The cars in this game love to flip all around constantly. If you nick an edge, you are flipping, or you will turn around uncontrollably. This becomes painful when you take a jump and your car wants to whip all around, making an otherwise easy run fail entirely, forcing you to redo the objectives you were going for in the first place. It's an annoying cycle and plays into what I said earlier about being frustrating over challenging. Mix the physics issues with general repetition and a lack of energy in the later levels, and you have a mix for a game that starts well, but evolves into something I grew tired of quickly. There are incentives to keep you playing, like unlocking a challenge mode, but it's bland. You do large jumps and races, and it's very bare bones with only one map. It's the same with the multiplayer, which has races and a fun hit and run idea where one person is it and you have to pass it to another player. This would be fun for a few moments until you realize there are no maps to play it on. If you're looking for an arcade racing multiplayer game, I'd point you towards Midtown Madness 3 on the Xbox. And the same is true for gameplay. It's sad because there is a fun core here, but it loses steam so fast that its entertainment value gets crushed.
Excellent!
Chase is not a visual knockout on this console, but it looks well enough. Its strengths are the variety of visual designs. Every set has something fresh, especially in the 1920s style movie with huge classic buildings. There's also the Bond knockoff that has fantastic jungles and tons of massive explosions. The Wasteland movie is the only real dud with only open blank spaces, but still it has a nice variety of terrain. The level design is a success here, and that is the best part of the experience. Moving on to the next level and seeing what is the next giant thing you are doing. As far as fidelity goes, it's fine. It's not a stunning use of the Xbox's power as an exclusive, but it's crisp. Nothing is jagged, and it is a colorful game with elements that pop out all around. Some of the backgrounds are missing details and look a bit empty, the lighting is nice, and some shadow work was done really well on these vehicles. There is a replay function where you can save and rewatch replays from the levels, and the shots are supposed to be angled like movies to make it look like a movie scene. It doesn't look like a movie though, and it comes off as messy. This feature should have worked, but it does not give you the movie feel that is needed. I wanted more inventive angles and more cohesive editing throughout. It's like the cinematic mode in Grand Theft Auto without any style. Other than that though, the visuals are fine. Nothing's gonna pop out to you as bad, and everything will be okay. It's a middle of the road package for the time. The audio in Chase is quite lackluster in general. It's obviously not the main focus of the game, but it's the sound elements that tie a game together, especially in a vehicle game where the car sounds are crucial. In this game, the car sounds are weakly implemented. The car engine noise is quite awful to hear. It's a loud sound that keeps the same tone and overpowers the rest of the sound in the game. It does not sound like an engine, and it ruins replays, where it should be like a movie with huge music, but all you're hearing is a grating noise the whole time. It ruins a lot of the noise experience, especially when wearing headphones. The music on top of it is quite generic and never stood out to me. It doesn't feel remotely cinematic and has that cheap feeling like they pulled it out of a music library. I would have loved to have seen different scores to fit their respective movies, like riffs on a Bond theme, but we don't get that here. I'd say stick with the custom soundtrack support. This is going to make the game so much better just by turning down the sound effects and jamming out to the discs burnt on your hard drive. Any game that implements this feature is a big deal, and it helps out the game so much, and it helps out Chase a lot. Really quickly, before we move into the final thoughts, I'd like to briefly compare this game to Stuntman. This is a review for Crash, and I don't want to spend too much time diving into a comparison, but it's essential to the history of this game since Stuntman came out the same year, and this game was constantly compared to it. The question I want to answer is if Stuntman is the better game, and I can 100% say Stuntman is the better game. I played through it right after beating this one, and Stuntman is so good. All of the parts of Chase that could have been done better is done better here. For one, Stuntman is more difficult, but never frustrating. It comes from the game feeling great to play with heavy but accurate handling. Swerving around turns is so much fun, and doing it all in one go is rewarding. Throw on that the game feels like actually making a movie, with the director shouting at you the whole time, specific movie directors it's riffing on, and cutscenes that makes the game feel like a behind-the-scenes look into stunt driving. It's all around just a better package, and it's no wonder Stuntman is remembered much better. And it's a bummer Xbox never got Stuntman, but the thinking was probably that Xbox already had Chase, but it wasn't a great trade-off. Chase, overall, is missing a lot to make it a great game. If this were a budget game, it would have been slightly more forgivable, but this was a $50 game on launch, and it doesn't feel like that. It starts promising with some fun set pieces and good car handling with slower vehicles, but quickly loses interest with repetition. There is fun here if you take long breaks, but even with that, some small annoyances like poor sound design start to weaken it. It sounds like I hate this game, and I really don't. I think it's mostly just mediocre, but it's missed potential and it could have been solid. It feels like a lot wasn't worked out to make it better. Chase ends up being uninteresting, especially with a much better stunt game that came out in 2002. On my ranking list, Chase secures the 74th spot out of 84. While I believe Arctic Thunder is a better controlling racer and a bit more fun, Chase has the edge in terms of replay value compared to the Sorcerer's Stone. When Chase Hollywood Stunt Driver was finally released in late 2002, the reception was not too great. On Metacritic, it holds a 60 out of 100, which puts it on the cusp of mixed reception. Some outlets did enjoy this game, like Tech TV, which gave it a 4 out of 5, stating that it was fast and addictive. Some were mixed, like GameSpot, who gave it a 6.5 out of 10, stating it was decent, but hated how little there was to do. And then there was a good amount on the negative side, like IGN, who gave it a 4.9 out of 10 and said the game was never fun. Official Xbox Magazine was on the dislike side. In the November 2002 issue, they gave it a 4.1 out of 10 and had barely anything good to say. The only positives were that the stunts were easy and the main character was a girl. Otherwise, they hated the controls and the lack of replay value. These reviews would not help this game out at all, and I think that's part of the reason it has slipped through the cracks of history. I have never seen anyone talk about this one. You can find a few videos of gameplay here and there on YouTube, but this is an odd part of Xbox history that never quite found an audience. It's a little sad because Dan Wagner in his interviews genuinely has passion and was excited to lead the charge for South African game development. I imagine would continue on after Chase, but wouldn't produce another game till 2007 with Final Armada, and they also produced a football quiz game in 2009. From the looks of it, they never did much after, and Dan Wagner would go on to other ventures like being the CEO of WalletDoc. Looking through old forums, I read about some developers' experiences with the company, and they seemed to be great memories. This wasn't it for South African game development either, which has had a ton of notable games being produced up until now, like Broforce and Viscera Cleanup Detail. Chase was an early part of this, and it's not remembered very well. If you look at Backlogged, it has a 2.4 out of 5, but only 12 people have said that they've played it, and there are no reviews. I'd like the hope that even if I wasn't a fan, I can spread awareness of this hidden game, and hopefully it can find somebody who loves it, or help remind you of great memories. But that does wrap it up for today. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like as it really helps out the channel. Subscribe to keep up with the retro Xbox content. Comment below with any Chase memories if you're interested in this game, or just let me know what you want to hear about next. Also, I want to thank all my campers and camp counselors. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll see you here next time at Camp Xbox.